What's up, internet? I have another video about NixOS today. I was mucking with my configuration here, my Nix configuration, just playing around, and I, have local configuration that I use. Obviously, I use Nix packages. Everybody uses Nix packages. That's where all your packages come from. But then I also use this NixOS hardware repository to configure the bits of hardware on my system, so that I don't need to know everything there is to know about my system in order to configure it. Although it didn't have my computer in it, so I had to invent it, and I did submit a couple pull requests upstream for the various systems that I have. Anyway, in the process of doing that, I was I had a very fuzzy understanding of some of the things that are inside of the NixOS hardware repository. Take a look here. So, as a example, this is for a P53. This is the configuration that's inside the NixOS hardware repository for a ThinkPad P53. And it imports, it has a Intel CPU, and it uses a CPI call thing. Then down here it says services throttle enable equal lib.mkDefault true. And I hadn't needed to understand what that meant. I had some vague idea that it had to do with overriding things, because I had seen that people typically tended to use that particular function, that lib.mkDefault thing, inside of configuration that was meant to be included by other people, as opposed to sort of top-level configuration. But I wasn't really solid on what I did. But I was on the NixOS, on the discourse, and I found this post, which is wonderful post by, well, the question's really good, and then the answer is wonderful. Olmo Kramer in September of 2020. You can go read this yourself. Links there, but I'm going to summarize what Olmo describes here, which appears to be correct. What do I want to do if I have a P53? Well, P53. I want to use the configuration implied by this thing, but I want to say I want to shut throttle off in my own configuration. So it's defined as true here, but somehow run through this make default thing. What sort of affordance do I use in my own configuration to turn it off? Well, the answer is anywhere inside of my Etsy NixOS configuration.nix, or in any file included by it, or wherever I get my configuration from, I simply put this value in there: services throttle enable equals false. But how do it know? How do it know that it should be true or false? How do it know? It's like a thermos. In reality, it's pretty simple. This use of lib.mkDefault here is a clue. So we can check out this module that he links to, that Olmo links to, inside of here. Yeah, there it is right there. What is make-default? Make-default is MkOverride 1000. I don't know what that means. Well, what it is, make-default is a function that takes a single argument, the value that you pass to it. So when we're over here in NixOS hardware, make-default takes this value true and assigns to this services throttle enable, it assigns a kind of like a tuple sort of to this value that says, all this stuff gets imported at one time, put in the same namespace eventually after it runs through this deconfliction stuff. But it says for this module, I'm saying lib.mkDefault sets the priority of true, in this case, to 1000. And now how do I know that? Well, make-default is a special case of this other function called MkOverride. And MkOverride is a function that takes two arguments. It takes a priority and a value. So, make default is just a nicer spelling of make override. So you could say either services throttle enable equal lib make default true. That's one way to say assign this value of true priority of 1,000. Or you could say services throttle enable equals lib make override 1,000 true. They result in exactly the same thing. And at parse time, when Nix goes through all the configuration, it jams all this stuff. Well, it takes each one of these things and sort of tries to deconflict any conflicting values that are in there, and it values with a lower priority supersede values with higher ones. So in this case, because well, I haven't discussed that yet, but values that aren't run through make default or make override or anything like that, like just services throttle enable equals true, or false, up above. Well, they have a priority too. It's just a default priority, and their priority is 100. So this here, services throttle enable equal true, is just a nicer spelling for services throttle equals lib make override 100 true, and that means the true. Sorry, let me change this around. False, just for sanity's sake. That means that if I wanted to shut off throttle D, I could either say services throttle enable equals false, or services throttle enable lib make override 100 false, or any value lower than the default value, which is 1,000, the make default value. Not exactly the default value, it's the make default value. And so only when two keys, like services throttle enable, have different values but the same priority, that Nix will complain about it. Otherwise, it will disambiguate, it will deconflict the apparent conflicting directives and say, I know what he wants to do here. He said that services throttle enable is false at priority 100. Somebody else said services throttle enable is true at priority 1,000. We're going to believe the 100. So now let's say that the P53 profile author forgot to put this here, and it said services throttle enable equals true rather than services throttle enable equals lib make default true. Well, how do you fix that? Well, I think it's probably pretty obvious from the description I just gave you. You could say lib make override 50 true instead of services throttle enable equals true. There is an alias for that function called lib.mkForce. So you just say, instead of services throttle enable equal true, you would say services throttle enable equals lib make force true, and you would be able to override whatever he said in there. And of course, you can go all the way down to 0 for the priorities there. 0 is the very highest. I don't know why you would do that. I don't think anybody typically uses those things. I am not a huge fan of numbered priorities like this, but it is a very simple way of trying to communicate intent in the code. So it works. It seems to work pretty well. So that is how the deconfliction stuff works in the presence of these priorities for values. There's a whole other system that I do not know how it works yet. I have not needed to go there, where attribute sets, which are kind of like the things in between the two curly braces in this module over here. This is an attribute set here. Imports and services are in the same set. I think you can there's stuff inside of NixOS hardware that defines something like this. It says hardware OpenGL extra packages equals these three things. And I think you can actually, inside of your own configuration, when you include this, or it gets included through 7 layers it includes or whatever, I think at the top level you can say, I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think you can just say hardware.opengl.extrapackages equals something else, and it will merge those two things. So the resulting list of extra packages will be this one plus these three. I have no idea how that works yet. I'm sure it's similarly as simple as the other one. I just haven't had to do that yet. So anyway, I'm getting there. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching.